Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Let's talk about the new Synchro Festival. I want to say new, but I think the Synchro Festival has already happened once or twice in the history of Master Duel, so not that new in general, but there are a few different decks that you can play. This time the loner decks aren't too bad, so there's always that, and I will be talking about the loner decks at the end of this video, which one I would prefer, which one I think might be the best in the end, but I think they've fairly balanced this time anyway. But let's talk about this little list here that I've come up with, and it is Swordsoul Tenyi, but technically the Tenyis don't really do Tenyi stuff because we do not have Lings. So let's talk through it. One Mystery Shell Dragon and one Angel Trumpeter in here because we run an Unexpected Die, so we can summon our Angel Trumpeter as the tuner if we want to, and a normal monster isn't bad for the Tenyis either. Also, none of your monsters need to have a worm tuner monsters, just worm non-tuner monsters, so this one is absolutely fine. And for that reason I put in another non-tuner monster that is a worm in here as well, so you can always special summon this, and since they're both level 4, that can be very helpful to go into your level 8 monster. We have triple Tenyi Spirit Hara because this card and two of those ones can go into a level 8 monster. This can recycle your stuff and it's a free body on board, so that can really help. We have Ash Blossom in here, we have Nibiru in here, and we have Infinite Impermanence in here, just because these are like free cards you get in the Master Pack bundles. You can play any other card that you like. You can play triple Swordsoul Blackout if you want to, or any other hand traps and whatnots. We have triple Tenyi Spirit Shtana. This card's second effect will probably not be doing all that much. Technically it's possible to get it off, but usually won't be doing anything. This card's just in here because you can special summon it. It's a level 4, it's a worm monster, and it's a water monster because that can come in handy for certain plays. One Moye, the card is limited, but who cares? We would have only played one anyway. Very, very searchable in this deck, so very, very nice. We have triple Swordsoul of Taya. This card has a bit more of an issue in here because we can't link off the Tenyis, so yeah, problematic, but we will still make do with some other cards that we can get into the graveyard. Otherwise, we have triple Incredible Ecclesia just because you want to be searching either one of those ones, so this card can be nice, and it technically can be a special summonable tuner monster. So there's that if you go second, or if your opponent somehow has a monster on board. I mean, Nibiru is a thing, so theoretically they might, but then they don't control more monsters than you. Anyway, we have Giant Pearfish in here. This is the card I've been kind of hinting at. This card very much benefits from you having a monster on board at the turn, because then you can tribute summon it. So this one has like all the Tenyis basically. It has Unexpected Die on here. We have so many different ways of special summoning a monster out and then being able to normal summon this, so it shouldn't be too bad. Plus then you can discard one monster. One monster doesn't have to be worm monster. You see this deck is full of monsters, so that shouldn't be a problem. And you can special summon one level 4 or lower worm type monster from your deck, which will mainly be Moye or Taya, because with Taya's effect you can send stuff to the graveyard, like Mare Mare, like your one Wishada, because that can come up then if you have the token, and so on and so on and so on. So you can send to the graveyard whatever you want. So this card's effect can sometimes be better than this one. You just have to see whatever works best for you, so you can decide which one of those. And then this one can technically also be used as a material to go into a level 10 Synchro monster. So all in all, card can be very nice, but obviously if this card gets disrupted, you lose quite a lot with it. We have double of this. Obviously you want to be running triple, very, very nice for going into level 10s. Locks you into Synchros, but doesn't really matter in this festival, does it? We have Mare Mare, the engine that you can cut if you want to, but this card is so neat still in this deck, even though you lack certain ways of summoning it that you usually would have, because this one can gain you access to any other level of Synchro that you couldn't otherwise, because usually you only can do level 8s and level 10s. But yes, you will have the Spirit in here that does some other stuff, but that's usually what you do. But with this one you can do lots of different things, and you can summon it off of Yazi, which is not too hard to go into because we have level 6s in here with this one, and we have level 1s in here, so we can go into that one. And technically there's other ways to go into it. If you banish one of those two, then you can reduce one monster's level, and so on and so on and so on. So there's plenty of ways of doing this one. One Vishada, mainly just because you can special summon it, but if you send it to the graveyard you can use it as a bounce from time to time, and this one can summon you any monster from your deck, so it works. Well, any Tenyi monster, but it is what it is. But you are locked into worm monsters for the rest of the turn, so keep that one in mind. We have the Nibiru, we have 1 Monster Reborn just to get your Synchros back from time to time or extend your plays. We have Swordsoul Emergence, a very, very good card that I have to run at 3 in this specific variant just so you have more Swordsoul names and you have more ways of searching your playmakers. You can cut it down to 1, see what happens if you want to keep it really cheap. We have Swordsoul Sacred Summit as in here at 1, technically searchable, and technically you can bump it up to 2 or 3 because this is a way of getting your Synchro, 1 of Synchro back, so not too bad if you have multiple of this one, but also can be a bit dead in your hand. So yeah, you can bump it up if you want to. You can cut 2 of this and run 2 of this instead, and so on and so on and so on. We have Heavenly Dragon Circle. You can tribute 1 Worm Monster, which shouldn't be too hard to do, and then most of the time you want to be searching the Strategist, but you can search basically anything. We have Infinite Permanence and 1 Swordsoul Blackout. If you banish it, can create a token. Ooh, very good for Synchro summoning. And also you can target 1 Worm Monster to you control on 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy them. Very, very nice. Control-wise, we have for the extra deck this one, we have this one, we have this one. We have this one, which can technically recycle your Synchro monster from the graveyard if you ever go into this, but you can only really go into this card with the whole Mare Mare combo, so kind of a convoluted way, but there aren't that many good cheap Synchro monsters in this game, so we had to improvise a bit. This card can be very, very important. We have Cypher Mode Zeta, can be quite okay as a level 7. We have White Aura Monoceros. Same thing with this one, although probably nobody has ever seen this card. It does have, during the battle phase, it has like a negate, so there's that. We have Baxia, because this card actually does stuff, shuffles back some cards, and it's a good worm monster that is a level 8. We have Enlightenment Paladin in here, just at 2, technically you can play it at 1, sometimes the effect comes up. It doesn't really matter how many of this you play. We have 1 Judgment Dragon in here just because of the 3000 attack point beater, and now the good ones are those 3, because those 3 actually do stuff. You can obviously play the Sinister Sovereign as well if you have it, but didn't want to include it because I feel like this one does a tiny bit more. Also already had it, so I didn't have to craft it, but yeah, you could be playing either one or both of them if you want to. So this deck, it has a strength because obviously it still has the core plays of Swordsoul, and the core plays of Swordsoul can be very annoying to deal with because like 2 to 3 disruptions isn't too bad, and you can go into different kind of things, but obviously it lacks the whole Tendy package to it. It lacks lots of the hand traps that you'd usually play. And in general, it's not the craziest deck, but it should be able to compete with the loner decks and some other decks that your opponent might be throwing at it that isn't that meta relevant. So if you already have some of the package or whatever, then you can still play this deck. And if you want to get into Swordsoul anyway, then this is a good time to possibly start that one. So there's that. Let's move on to the next one. The second one, a favorite, long-time favorite of mine, but obviously a lot hampered because we do not have the Searcher, the Xyz 1 Gallon Granite, and we do not have the Prankids package, and we do not have Block Dragon, one very, very important card. Few, because I don't really like Block Dragon. It is what it is. I wanted to make a Adamancipator version, mainly because that's one of the decks that I also had, and it isn't a very expensive deck in the first place. So let's talk about it. Same package in here, but this is a rock monster, so we can excavate it, and this is a tuner monster, so we can go into some tuner shenanigans with unexpected die. So I really like this package in here. We have Doki Doki at 2. Doki Doki can be helpful, can summon you out the Adamancipator Analyzer because you have some level 4 rock monsters that you have in hand. It's not that many than in some other of the variants, but there are like 6-7 of them, so we can do some stuff. Plus you can summon out any of the other ones and then have at least some stuff on board if you have the tuner, but usually you can cut down a few of them and play a few more rock monsters, well, earth monsters, so you can actually use the Doki Doki effect to go into Analyzer. The problem with it is this deck kind of relies on them a little bit, and I'll be talking about why that is. We have triple Seeker because you want to special summon things, triple Researcher because you want to special summon things, 2 Vernasilf, the one that draws you. You have to watch out with this one because this one is a bit problematic with certain things because it locks you into only using earth monster effects for the rest of this turn, so very, very annoying from time to time, but you can use this at the end of your turn to go into your Naturia Beast, for example, because you have some of those tuners. You can use it to bring some of your rock monsters back, like Huakumera Guardian, so that's not too bad. You don't really want to use it all that much early on, because yes, you can still use your tuners, but then you have problems with your extra deck monsters. So it's more of a kind of end at the turn, but it does do something for the consistency, so I thought let's include that too. You can tweak the ratios a tiny bit more to your liking. 1 Gargantes, this card Bit problematic because you cannot special summon it if it's getting revealed, so yeah, it's okay, but it's good because we have Adamancipator Friends and you can get this card then to your hand. And also this is a way to destroy spell and trap cards on your opponent's field. If they play a very floodgatey deck, then you can ram this possibly into one of your opponent's monsters and clear the spell traps. One Yugioh Guardian, just because you really use this card anyway. You have good ways of getting it out of the deck. There's some ways of putting it on top of the deck. There's some ways of sending it to the graveyard and special summoning it from there, and so on and so on. So one is fine in this specific budget variant, but if you want to go a bit more expensive, a bit better, you could run 3 of it. We have Revival Golem because we can send it to the graveyard with this. We have technically the discard, so there's also these kind of effects. And yes, it's a rock monster, so you can special summon it. Tackle Crusader, another card that does some stuff if it's sent to the graveyard, so it works with Miracle Rupture, and also it works when you Synchro summon it off. Well, you use it as a Synchro material, then you can flip down some stuff, which can be very helpful. Obviously, you want to run Triple Analyzer, but you can't. Now, the interesting bit, this is a fire monster, which we want in the graveyard because of Leo. Leo can get you things back like Yugioh Guardian during your opponent's turn. You can technically play some other cards that you want to, but it becomes a bit iffy from time to time. And this card also has the effect that you can put one of your Adamancipator monsters back on top, or Adamancipator cards from your hand or graveyard on top of your deck, which can be helpful because that also applies to extra deck monsters. So you can technically get your extra deck monsters back, considering we only play one of each. So there is that. We have the same effect with the wind one, but you have other ways of getting a wind monster to the graveyard, so I felt one was fine. And the blue one, first of all, because your water monster is the strongest one, and you kind of need a water monster in the graveyard to use its full potential. Plus, if this card is better summoned off of an Adamancipator card, you can draw one card, and that is never too bad. You can adjust the ratios a bit to your liking if you want. Rock Band, Xeno Guitar, a card that usually is quite nice with Block Dragon, but also without Block Dragon, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can target one rock monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand, and then place one card from your hand on top of the deck. So also cards that you could be playing at 2 or 3 if you want to, because it sets up your Adamancipator plays a bit. I felt like one, it was fine. Nibiru, because it's a rock monster, although there's no way of searching it now, but it's still in here because you need it from time to time, because going second can be a pain. Can play any other hand traps if you want. We have Monster Reborn, just to extend your plays. Unexpected Die, already talked about this. And Emancipator Signs, a card that you kind of would want to be running at 2 or 3, because it's not hard once per turn, and it not only does set up your plays for next turn, also or for your next Adamancipator effect, it also gets stuff back from a graveyard, so I feel like the card's effect very, very strong. Adamancipator Friends, a card you'd usually not run in Adamancipator because it locks you into rock monsters, but for this version, it doesn't really matter that much, and for a budget build as well, because it can add you stuff to your hand that you otherwise would be lacking, your tuners, for example. So this card is a neat searcher, and in the end, you kind of only want to be going into your Adamancipator extract monsters anyway, because all the other Synchro monsters that are cheap are basically garbage, but it can sometimes be a bit annoying of a card, so watch out when you use it, because this effect is for the rest of this turn, so you can still use it at a later stage once you've already done your combos. Double Miracle Rupture, just to extend your plays a bit and send stuff to the graveyard, like Guardian, that you then could special summon from your graveyard with effects like Vernisylph or something else like Monster Reborn or Adamancipator Signs. I don't really like running this card at 3 because it's a hard once per turn, and sometimes you don't really want to use the effect, but you could run it at 3 if you want to. Not that many drawbacks with it. I just felt like we have enough stuff that we don't need it at 3 anymore. We have Adamancipator Relief at 2, mainly because you can add it off of the Risen, and if your opponent disrupts your combos, you'll still probably have an Adamancipator monster on board, so you can still do stuff at least. It's basically like a cheaper version of a hand trap. You can run hand traps as well, but hand traps aren't searchable by Risen Leo, so keep that one in mind. And then we have Resonance, mainly because we want to have an Adamancipator Synchro monster on board anyway, and it stops your opponent's monster effects, so that can be quite nice as well. For the extra deck, obviously you want to be running good level 8s, so if you have any good ones, splash them in here, and then some other shenanigans, because technically we can go into level 4 with these 2 ones, so there's that to keep in mind. We have Haster in here, we have Quandax in here, you can Synchro summon during your opponent's turn, and it's a water monster, so keep that one in mind. Cupid Pitch, because it's a tuner, so that can be helpful. We have Merry Melfies for going second from time to time. Naturia Beast, you don't have to play this, but I felt like we are not that heavy on the ultra rares, and it can be quite a nice one with the Vernisylph. Other than that, you don't have any way of summoning this. You could technically put like a level 3 rock monster in here if you wanted to, then it's easier to go into this, but other than that, you'd have to change the ratios a bit to get this one out. as much as possible, but it is what it is. I think there are like Sentry Guardian or whatever it is, that is a level 3 rock monster you could also be playing. There are some good ones. We have Powered Insectron in here. We have Stardust Charge Warrior, a wind monster that can draw you a card. So this card is actually a card you want to be going into from time to time at least. We have White Aura Dolphin, a card that can come back because you can banish one water monster from your graveyard, so that works. We have Hyper Psychic Riser. We have Altergeist, Drag Virion, a card that you'll never see play, but technically you can negate an attack. And then, yeah, it's not a good card, but I just put it in here because there's not that many good synchros. We have the Adamancipators in here. We have Dragon Shell in here to return some of the Synchro monsters from the graveyard, and the second effect is also interesting where it draws you a card, and we have one Enlightenment Paladin in here just because it doesn't really matter. You can play any other level 8 Synchros that are actually good. Upsides of this deck, it's quite explosive in terms of what it can put on board, but the problem is you don't have that many good extra deck monsters to do so, and downside is if it gets disrupted, it doesn't do all that much, and yeah, the plays aren't super crazy in comparison to other Synchro decks, obviously. The good part is also that this deck can be used later on, because the Adamancipators are, as well as Swordsouls, still very competitive if you upgrade them a little bit, do the whole Block Dragon shenanigans and whatnot. So if you want to invest into Adamancipators at one point, it will always be somewhat relevant as well. It will never be like a terrible deck to play, and that hasn't changed so far, so there's always that one. Let's move on to the last deck, and the last one is a fan favorite. Who would have thought? Dark Magician, but non-fusion Dark Magician that focuses a bit more on ritual summon, but not that much. It is a deck that is definitely playable. You can craft this deck with just 1,500 gems. It's a triple structure deck, and the deck is quite nice in general anyway, even if you play it outside of the Synchro Festival. If for the people that do not want to be playing Synchro monsters because for some reason you just don't like the mechanic, fair enough, I feel you. This is a list that you can be playing. One card I want to mention, Preparation of Rites, would work quite well in here at 2 or 3. You can just take out one of this, and then you should be fine with it, because that boosts the consistency of the deck a little bit and gives you a few more options without sacrificing your normal summon in comparison to the Manju, so there's always that. For the ratios, 2 Dark Magician, you can try out 3, but I felt like it was a bit bricky from time to time. Triple Magician Souls, obviously. 1 Magic Karibo. I love this card and can be so nice in the grind game, but also if your opponent negates it and just doesn't do all that much, so there's always that. But I like it at 1 because it's fairly searchable and it does stuff, and it can revive Magician of Chaos as well because it counts as Dark Magician in the graveyard. We have Magician's Rod, very, very important card here because it's your main searcher. Triple Manju because it can add this card, and it can add Chaos Form, which I put in here because we want to be ritual summoning from time to time, and this card can actually be searched by Manju in comparison to Secrets of Dark Magic. We have Dark Magician Girl in here because there's still the whole Dark Magician Girl combo in here with the whole of bond between teacher and student, and this one Kaiju because this deck struggles with getting rid of monsters that can't be destroyed and cannot be targeted, so there's that. And attack stat wise, we usually cap at 2,500. Very annoying to get rid of the Kaiju then, but if you don't need the Kaiju, you can always use it to ritual summon with Chaos Form as well. 2 Magician of Chaos because this card is, I don't want to say the boss monster because it's not that easy to go into with this specific variant, but it's easily summonable. It can be resummoned off of Eternal Soul and off of Magic Karibo, and it triggers the effects of Dark Magical Circle when you summon it, because on the field and the graveyard it counts as Dark Magician, and it can target cards on the field and destroy them every time a spell trap is activated, well, once per turn, but you know what I'm talking about. And technically it can special summon 1 Chaos or Blackluster Soldier Ritual monster from your hand, which you do have with this one as well. This card can not only be summoned in this deck, but also obviously be used to search some stuff, so very important card. We have bond between teacher and student in here. We have 2 Magician Salvation and 2 Eternal Soul. You can technically add 1 extra in here if you feel like you don't get these cards enough. 1 Chaos Form. Technically you can use Dark Magician from your graveyard to summon one of them from your hand, but usually you don't want to. But it's not terrible because with this one you at least get another Dark Magician into the graveyard. Dark Magic Circle, very good removal, very good searcher, so a very nice card. 2 Forbidden Chalice and 2 Lost Winds, just the lineup of, well, let's hope our opponent gets disrupted a bit. I'm not 100% sure if I don't want to be playing triple Lost Wind, but this card can also help you if you have to go second, which you usually don't want to, but you could, and it can help you against monsters that aren't special summoned, so I wanted to include it at least. We have Dark Burning Magic in here, we have triple Soul Servant, very good searcher, and you will a lot of the time get off 2 draws off of this one because it's not that hard to get into Dark Magician Girl and Dark Magician, so there's that. Secrets of Dark Magic, significantly less good in this deck. mainly because of the fact that you can't run any fusions, and you have to use Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl as material, so it doesn't work all that often, but it can be useful in this deck because it's a quick play, so you can go into this card during your opponent's turn, and that gives you a way of getting Dark Magician into the graveyard because you can't link it off anymore. Another downside to this deck. So this is a way to get into the graveyard for resummoning it with Eternal Soul. We have Torrential Tribute in here just to slow down the game a bit, and spell traps aren't that bad in this deck. Same for Lost Wind, just to slow it down and potentially give you an out to certain monsters because you have their attack as well. And Eternal Soul protects your Dark Magicians from any kind of card effects, but obviously it has some downsides as well. Talking about this deck, it can be a really nice grindy deck, but it bricks from time to time, and it has the obvious issues that link monsters aren't part of this and the fusion monsters aren't. So it's very hard for you to get Dark Magician from the field back to the graveyard till your opponent runs it over. So the whole Eternal Soul plus your Dark Magical Circle has some issues that it usually shouldn't have, but we added some stuff in here and it's fairly decent. It's a different way of playing in the festival, and it works to a point, I would say, and it's quite nice that you get to play things like Magician of Chaos to actually do some stuff. Let's move on to the last section of this video, where I want to talk a bit about this time's loner decks, because Konami has impressed me a little bit with their decks, but they're still one of the favorites, or the favorite that I want to be talking about as well. So we have the loner decks of Goatee, we have Mirrored Ice Jade, and we have this one. We have the whole Dark Resonator plus Supreme whatnot it's called, Red Nova Dragon, and it's the whole Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend basically. So this deck, I would say, in my opinion, is the best deck that you can be playing this festival from the loner decks, mainly because I feel like it's the most consistent, and it also has some generic cards in here that are very much like. A lot of them have the same ones in here, with things like Cult by the Grave, things like Feather Duster and Raigeki, but they have Effect Veiler, which can be nice. They have Fiendish Chain, so that's good if you go first. But this deck also has lots of cards that you probably shouldn't be running in any setup. You have Clashing Souls in here, we have King Synchro in here, Synchro Call in here, we have Resonator Command here, which isn't a bad card, but lots of decks won't be running it in the end. We have Burning Soul in here, a card that you probably wouldn't be running. Time to Stand Up, also very, very depending on you actually having your Synchro. So if your opponent disrupts you, this deck does very little, but the plays that this deck have are fairly consistent. You have the Red Rising Dragons, you have ways to get into them, we have Crimson Resonator, we even have cards like Chaos Ruler in here, very nice, and we can go into these boss monsters with Red Supernova Dragon and Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. In the end, this deck is probably as balanced as the other ones, but Goatee, I felt like from going through hands, is still a bit bricky, and your opponent can also shut it down quite easily. It's not a bad deck, but it lacks on certain fronts, and the whole Ice Jade thing has the same issue. Ice Jade starts with a lot of hands that don't really be doing all that much. It's very grindy and can be very, very interesting, but without the Marince's Link to loop the Searcher, it feels a bit iffy from time to time. You don't have all that much access to certain plays, and if you don't have access to a certain specific play, then your turn board looks very, very bad, in my personal opinion, but it can be played, obviously. But I just feel like this will potentially, in my personal humble opinion, achieve the most. But we shall see in the end which one is better. So take this statement with a grain of salt. This isn't the best deck, but in my opinion, it's the one that will work out the best in the end. But if that's true or not, you tell me once you'll be playing it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. But most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.